Okay, so a couple of things. I know in the try it section, it's going to ask you about whether or not a relation is a function, and then it's going to ask you if that function is one to one. So just as a reminder, to determine if something is a function, we first want to check to make sure it's going to pass the vertical line test. Vertical line test is just tell me if it's just a function, period. So I can see if I take my vertical line, I'm sliding my vertical line, and everywhere I go, this vertical line is only touching my parabola one time. That means it passed my vertical line test. It is definitely a function. The second thing that you want to talk about when you think about it further is whether or not that function is one to one. So, a different test or a similar test that can determine if something is in fact one to one is something called a horizontal line test. So, a horizontal line test is going to work the same way, but this time we're checking to see if my horizontal line is going to pass or fail. So if I take this horizontal line and I'm sliding it, I can already see, and these two locations, let me get a nice little icon for you. So I can see here and I can see here, I have just found two locations where my horizontal line is going to touch my function. So because that happened, because my horizontal line hit two times, that means I have failed my horizontal line test. That means it is not one-to-one. So let's just recap, just in quick words, if it passes the VLT, that means it is a function. If it passes the HLT, that means not only is it a function, but it is a one-to-one function. Now, just because something's not one-to-one doesn't mean it's not a function. You're checking for two different things. First, we check to see, is it a function to begin with? If so, it passes the vertical line test. Then we take it one step further. Is it a one-to-one function? This one is not a one-to-one function because it failed our horizontal line test. We want to talk about really what's happening is the inverse, and that's what it comes down to. The inverse is not a function. So if I wanted to make the inverse of x squared, I'm going to make it the square root of x. And you can see automatically, so this basically took my original graph and the inverse, I basically turned it on its side. And this graph itself, if I were to just, once again, if I'm checking to see is this graph, so this is my inverse of my original picture. If I wanted to see if this one was a function, I'm going to get my vertical line test going, on and popping. Right there, I can see this particular picture is not a function. And that kind of goes back to what happened over here. Because the horizontal line test, when I turn it horizontally, it failed. I'm physically turning my graph horizontally, it's failing. So what we do to get around it, as far as x squared goes, I'm only going to take half of that. So this is now my graph of x squared. Let's go ahead, or sorry, the square root of x. So let me just write that in. This graph is the square root of x, and it basically is half of a parabola. And that way, by only taking half of the parabola, we are now going to pass our vertical line test, so it is a function. And I'm going to be able to, as you can see, I can now also pass my horizontal line test. So here we go. Boom. Gonna slide this graph up. And now everywhere I go, my graph is only touching one time. So there you have it. This is what the square root of graph looks like. It is half of a parabola turned on its side. Because it is half of a parabola, it is a function to begin with. And not only is it now just a function, it is also an even fancier one, a one-to-one function.